Have you ever found yourself utterly bewildered by a woman's emotional landscape? One moment, she's warm, loving, completely present, and the next, she's cold, distant, almost cruel. You've probably asked yourself, what happened? What did I do wrong? Why does she keep shifting like this? What if I told you that what you're experiencing isn't her instability at all, but rather a profound psychological mirror being held up to your own unconscious mind? The pain you feel in these moments, the confusion, the helplessness, the frustration, stems from a fundamental misunderstanding. You've been trying to solve the wrong problem. You've been trying to understand her, when what you actually need is to understand yourself. Today, I'm going to reveal what Carl Jung, one of history's most profound psychological thinkers, discovered decades ago. She's not crazy, she's your shadow. And this revelation will transform how you experience every relationship in your life. Deep within your masculine psyche lies what Jung called the anima, the feminine aspect of your soul. This isn't about gender stereotypes. This is about psychological wholeness. The anima represents your capacity for emotion, intuition, connection, and receptivity, qualities traditionally associated with the feminine that exist within every man. When you were young, you began to learn which parts of yourself were acceptable to express in the world. In most cultures, boys are taught early on that certain emotions are unmanly. Vulnerability, tenderness, emotional sensitivity, these qualities get suppressed, pushed down into your unconscious, but they don't disappear. They become part of your anima. The problem arises because what remains unconscious doesn't stay quiet. It seeks expression through projection. And who becomes the perfect screen for this projection? The women in your life. When you meet a woman who deeply attracts you, you're not just responding to her physical appearance or personality. You're unconsciously recognizing a living embodiment of your own anima, your own repressed feminine aspects. This is why falling in love can feel so magical, so meant to be. You're not just meeting her, you're meeting disowned parts of yourself. But this psychological projection sets up an impossible dynamic. You're expecting her to perfectly embody and express your own unconscious feminine energy, to be the emotional, intuitive, nurturing presence that you've denied in yourself. And when she inevitably fails to match this unconscious expectation, because she's a real person, not a projection, you feel betrayed, confused, even abandoned. The shadow, your disowned self. Even more profound than the anima is what Jung called the shadow, those aspects of yourself that you've rejected, repressed, or denied. Your shadow contains not just your negative qualities, but also positive potential that you've never developed. Your shadow includes your unacknowledged vulnerabilities, your capacity for rage, your deepest fears of inadequacy, your unmet childhood needs, your capacity for emotional dependence. These aren't weaknesses. They're essential parts of your humanity that you've been taught to hide, even from yourself. When a woman in your life suddenly seems to change, when she becomes cold, critical, or withdraws her affection, what's really happening is that she's activated your shadow. She's inadvertently touching those wounded, rejected parts of yourself that you've worked so hard to keep hidden. Her withdrawal triggers your fear of abandonment. Her criticism touches your deep sense of inadequacy. Her emotional unavailability awakens your childhood longing for unconditional love and acceptance. It's not her behavior that causes your suffering. It's the way her behavior resonates with your unhealed wounds. Female archetypes, beyond stereotypes. While you're projecting your anima onto women, they're navigating their own complex psychological landscape. Jung identified several feminine archetypes that manifest in women's psychology. The Great Mother archetype embodies both nurturing protection and devouring control. When a woman shifts from caring for you to seeming to suffocate you with her needs or expectations, you're witnessing this archetypal energy in action. The maiden represents purity, potential, and new beginnings. When a woman in your life shows innocence, playfulness, or spontaneity, this archetype is active. The Queen embodies authority, boundaries, and wisdom. When she suddenly establishes firm limits or makes decisions that prioritize her well-being over your desires, the Queen has emerged. The enchantress represents transformation, intuition, and mystery. When she seems unpredictable, emotionally fluid, or deeply intuitive, this archetype is expressing itself. The shadow feminine contains all the aspects of femininity that society has deemed unacceptable: rage, power, sexual autonomy, fierce independence. When a woman expresses anger, sets absolute boundaries, or claims her space without apology, you're seeing the shadow feminine in action. What makes these archetypes so challenging for you is not their existence, but the way they interact with your projections. When a woman shifts from the nurturing mother to the boundary-setting queen, she's not being inconsistent. She's expressing different aspects of her complete feminine nature. But if you've projected your need for unconditional nurturing onto her, this shift feels like betrayal, the psychological dance. This creates a profound and often painful psychological dance. You project your anima onto her, expecting her to fulfill your unconscious emotional needs. She responds from her authentic self, including all her archetypal energies. When her response doesn't match your projection, you experience pain, confusion, and sometimes anger. This pain isn't telling you that she's wrong or crazy. It's telling you that you're encountering your own unconscious material. The very qualities that frustrate you most in her, emotional intensity, changing needs, intuitive rather than logical decisions, are often the exact qualities you've repressed in yourself. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The emotional triggers you experience in relationships aren't random. They're precise psychological indicators pointing to your own unintegrated shadow material. The most painful moment in this dynamic occurs when she becomes emotionally unavailable to you, when she withdraws, goes cold, or seems indifferent to your needs. In these moments, you don't just feel rejected by her, you feel rejected by life itself. The pain cuts deeper than any physical wound could. Why does her withdrawal hurt so intensely? Because it activates your deepest wound, the fear that you are fundamentally unlovable. This fear doesn't originate with her. It was formed long before she entered your life, perhaps in early childhood experiences of conditional love, perhaps in formative rejections, perhaps in cultural messages about what makes a man worthy. But her withdrawal brings this ancient wound to the surface with devastating intensity. Here's the profound truth that Jung understood. She is not rejecting you. She is reflecting the ways you have rejected yourself. Every time she pulls away emotionally, she's showing you the parts of yourself you've abandoned. Your vulnerability, your need for connection, your emotional sensitivity. Every time her mood seems to shift inexplicably, she's mirroring the emotional complexity you've denied in yourself. Every time she seems impossible to understand, she's revealing how disconnected you've become from your own emotional truth. This is why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What feels like her unpredictable, even cruel behavior is actually your unconscious material returning to you as fate, as external circumstances that force you to confront what you've denied internally. The raw, painful truth is this: what you perceive as her emotional instability is actually your confrontation with your own emotional incompleteness. When she seems to inexplicably withdraw her affection, she's not being manipulative. She's responding to your own emotional unavailability that you haven't been able to recognize in yourself. When her mood seems to shift without reason, she's responding to subtle changes in your presence that your conscious mind hasn't registered. When she seems impossible to please, she's reflecting your own impossible standards for yourself that drive your relentless pursuit of achievement and validation. Think about the last time she suddenly became distant. Remember that confusion, that anxiety that gripped you. That wasn't just about her behavior. It was your own abandoned inner child crying out for the connection you've denied yourself. Remember when her criticism seemed to cut straight to your core. That wasn't her cruelty. It was your own inner critic finally finding external voice. Jung observed that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But this transformation isn't always gentle. Often, it's a violent psychological reaction that burns away your illusions and forces you to confront your deepest fears. Consider how often you've labeled her too emotional when she expresses feelings that make you uncomfortable. Notice how quickly you dismiss her intuitive knowing as irrational when it challenges your logical defenses. Recognize how easily you become frustrated when she needs emotional connection that you don't know how to provide, not because you're incapable, but because you've severed that capacity within yourself. This is the brutal gift of the feminine in your life, to show you, through painful reflection, exactly what you've disowned in yourself, to bring your shadow into the light where you can finally see it, acknowledge it, and begin the work of integration. As long as you continue to project your unintegrated anima onto women, expecting them to carry your emotional needs while you remain safely disconnected from vulnerability, you will continue to experience this painful pattern. The women in your life will continue to seem like emotional mysteries, shifting between warmth and coldness, love and indifference, not because they are unstable, but because they are reflecting your own unacknowledged emotional complexity. And here's the most challenging truth. When you accuse her of being crazy or unstable, you're actually engaging in a profound psychological defense mechanism. By pathologizing her emotions, you protect yourself from having to face your own emotional wounds. By dismissing her as irrational, you avoid confronting the irrationality of your own unconscious projections. By blaming her for the pain in your relationship, you escape the harder task of healing your own psychological fragmentation. This pattern will repeat, with her, with the next woman, with every significant feminine presence in your life, until you recognize that what appears as her inconsistency is actually the consistent revelation of your own unconscious material. The turning point comes when you finally understand, she's not crazy, she's not the problem, she's the mirror. Now you stand at a crossroads. You can continue to see women as emotional mysteries, as confusing, contradictory beings whose behavior you must decode and manage, or you can accept the profound truth that Jung discovered. The feminine in your life is the living embodiment of what you have denied in yourself. This realization, painful as it is, contains your liberation. Because once you understand that your emotional suffering in relationships comes not from her behavior, but from your projections and unintegrated shadow, you can begin the real work, the work of psychological integration. This means reclaiming your anima, embracing your capacity for emotional depth, intuition, vulnerability, and receptivity. It means acknowledging your shadow, facing your fears of inadequacy, your unmet needs for validation, your capacity for emotional dependence, your childhood wounds around love and acceptance. The path forward isn't about learning to handle women better. It's about becoming whole within yourself. It's about the courageous journey of integrating all the parts of yourself you've rejected, repressed, or denied. As Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. What does this integration look like in practice? It begins with radical honesty about your emotional life. Can you admit when you feel vulnerable? Can you acknowledge your need for connection without seeing it as weakness? Can you recognize when your anger at her is actually anger at yourself for failing to meet your own impossible standards? Integration means developing a relationship with your own inner feminine, learning to value intuition alongside logic, receptivity alongside action, being alongside doing. It means recognizing that emotional sensitivity isn't weakness, but a profound form of strength and intelligence that you've denied yourself. It requires facing your deepest fears, the fear of abandonment, the fear of inadequacy, the fear of emotional dependency. These fears didn't begin with her. They began in your earliest experiences of relationship, perhaps with your mother, perhaps with other significant feminine presences in your childhood. Until you acknowledge and heal these primal wounds, you'll continue to project them onto every woman who gets close to you. Integration demands that you reclaim responsibility for your emotional life. As long as you expect women to be the carriers of your emotional needs, to nurture you, validate you, make you feel secure, you remain psychologically incomplete, perpetually searching outside yourself for what can only be found within. When you begin this journey of integration, something remarkable happens in your relationships with women. As you reclaim your projected anima, you can finally see her as she truly is, not as the carrier of your emotional needs, but as a complete human being with her own authentic archetypal energies. As you integrate your shadow, her behavior no longer triggers your deepest wounds, because those wounds are finally being acknowledged and healed. You become capable of real intimacy, not the desperate merging of a man seeking his missing feminine half, but the profound connection of two whole human beings recognizing each other's completeness. The arguments that once seemed endless and circular begin to resolve. You no longer need her to change to accommodate your projections. You no longer react from unconscious triggers when she expresses her authentic self. You develop the capacity to stand in the fire of intense emotion, both hers and yours, without being consumed by it. You learn to welcome her emotional depth as a gift rather than a threat. You begin to see her intuitive knowing as a valuable complement to your logical thinking. You recognize her shifting archetypal expressions from mother to queen to enchantress to warrior, not as inconsistency, but as the natural movement of an integrated feminine psyche. And perhaps most importantly, you develop compassion for yourself and for her. You understand that both of you have been caught in a psychological dance neither of you created consciously. You recognize that her triggers and yours aren't personal attacks, but opportunities for healing and growth. You see that what you've called relationship problems have actually been invitations to psychological wholeness. This is the transformation Jung promised. From psychological projection to conscious relationship, from wounded reaction to integrated response, from emotional dependence to authentic connection. The women in your life have never been crazy. They've been your most profound teachers, reflecting back to you exactly what you most needed to see in yourself. The emotional pain you've experienced in relationships hasn't been punishment. It's been guidance, showing you precisely where your work of integration needs to focus. So when you next find yourself thinking, she's crazy, or why can't she just be consistent? Pause, take a breath, ask yourself, what is this showing me about myself? What part of my own emotional nature am I rejecting? What unconscious material is being activated? What would integration look like in this moment? This isn't easy work. As Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The suffering you've experienced in relationships has been the necessary catalyst for your psychological growth. Now, you can thank that suffering for what it's shown you and begin the real work of becoming whole. Jung also reminded us that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. This is your invitation to awakening, to turn your gaze inward and reclaim all that you've projected outward, to recognize that the mystery you've been trying to solve in her has always been the mystery within yourself. Have you recognized yourself in what I've shared today? Have you seen how your own projections have shaped your experience of women? Share your insights in the comments below. If this video has illuminated something important for you, give it a like and subscribe to continue this journey of psychological understanding together. And don't miss our previous videos exploring other aspects of Jungian psychology and relationships. Remember, she was never crazy. She was never the problem. She was always the mirror, reflecting exactly what you needed to see in yourself. And in that reflection lies your opportunity for the most profound transformation of your life.